Well, good evening, everybody. We're going to get started with tonight's version of the OSU Extension Farm Office is Live. And tonight is our third installment of the Farm Office series on the Monday evenings during the month of April. Tonight we have some questions that have held over from last week, as well as some developments that have occurred since just even late Friday night in Congress and the USDA. So tonight we're going to be discussing the CARES Act, some updates there, as well as the USDA money that's part of the CARES Act. The WIP Plus program is a program that many farmers might not be familiar. In fact, I would say most farmers are not familiar with that here in Ohio. So we're going to give you an update on that. Take a peek at commodity prices, and also look at the dairy margin coverage program. And again, we'll have time for your questions. Just as far as a few housekeeping items, the Q&A button is available for you to ask questions. We invite you to ask questions as we move along through tonight's Farm Office Live, and just type those into the Q&A box, and as we'll be moderating those questions and answering those as we go through tonight. So don't hesitate to put in your comments or questions in the Q&A. And I'd like to introduce you again to our team, our Farm Office team. From left to right, Diane Shoemaker, who's our field specialist for dairy production economics, 34 years in OSU Extension Service. Then we have Barry Ward, who is the assistant professor and the director of the OSU Income Tax School, and the leader of our production business management. And Barry's with us, has been with OSU Extension for almost 30 years. Then we have Ben Brown, who's assistant professor of agricultural risk management in the Department of Agriculture, Environmental, and Development Economics. Ben has been with OSU Extension for 2 years. Myself are next, David Marison, extension educator for agriculture and co-leader of the Ohio Ag Manager team. And I've been working with Extension for 23 years. And then the top right, Peggy Kirk Hall, who is the director of the OSU Ag and Resource Law Program. Peggy's been with Extension for 20 years. Unfortunately, Peggy is under the weather tonight, so she won't be able to join us, but we expect her back to full steam next Monday evening. And then making it all work behind the scenes is Julie Strauser, program assistant in Ag and Natural Resources. And she's just making everything happen behind the scenes, so we thank Julie for that. And we'll jump right in. Again, just as a reminder, ask questions, put those questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those. But Ben, I think we're gonna start with you, because here it is, Friday evening. You've just put your work to bed for the week, you think, and then 7 o'clock, here comes an announcement out of the USDA on how they are thinking about spending their portion of the CARES Act. So we're going to jump into that, and that's a question that we've been wondering and thinking about. And if I can get there it goes. So the CARES funding, the USDA, that was a question that's been, how is the money that was allocated to the USDA, how was that going to be spent? So Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off tonight.
Yeah, thank you, David. And thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you for spending your Monday evenings with us. We really enjoy doing this. It's fun for us to put these on and interact with people. We love questions, so make sure at the bottom you're putting questions in. This is a topic, as David mentioned, it was something that came Friday evening at 7 o'clock. In fact, it was Friday afternoon we got the announcement that there was going to be a press conference Friday afternoon or Friday evening, and then we got the announcement that there was going to be the aid package, and we only got a few details. Right now, a lot of this is speculation in terms of, in terms of how this is going to look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you what we heard from the press release, what we understand currently from USDA, and then I'm going to take a pause, and I'm going to make a very distinct break, because then I'm going to kind of explain how I think they implement some of this stuff. And so again, it's not, we've got a lot of uncertainty around this, but it's going to be something that's of great interest to folks, because one, this is money that's needed by the sector, by the industry right now. It's something that has been talked about. Do I think it's going to be as big for the crop side as what the market facilitation payments have been the last 2 years? No, but we'll talk about that more as we go. So I want to first step back and just express a little bit and talk a little bit about how we got here and why we're talking about just the USDA funding. Well, this is part of that larger $2.2 trillion CARES Act. They also included the Paycheck Protection Program and other benefits to the society as whole. We did get, there was 49 billion allocated to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and that's where this is coming from. That's what the announcement that you might have heard a little bit on Friday is coming from. Is now we're talking about the portion and starting to look through how USDA is going to divvy some of this up. So just as a reminder, and I'm showing you that pie chart there on the left-hand side. The 23.5 billion that we were really looking at in terms of ag products is really represented on the right-hand side of that pie chart. So you had the 14 billion there for the Credit Commodity Corporation, which again, the CCC is the organization that pays out for agriculture risk coverage, the ARC program, the price loss coverage program, the PLC, dairy margin coverage, EQIP, Conservation Reserve Program. A lot of our farm programs come out of that CCC. You can think of it as a line of credit, that there's a $30 billion cap on it. We use that up, and then at the end of the year, most of the time we don't even use up the full 30 billion, but at the end of the year, whatever has been used or lost, keep in mind, some of these programs actually bring in money. It's like the Dairy Margin Coverage Program actually brings in money. You pay into the program, so you bring in, and if there's a year where farmers are paying more than the program pays out, you would actually have a net benefit to the Credit Commodity Corporation. Same way you can think of marketing loan programs. When farmers put their grain on loan with the government, if they're not getting a benefit, if the farmers aren't getting a benefit, then the government got a benefit. And so there's money sometimes flowing in. ARC and PLC, they're always going out. Money is always going out. Nothing's coming in. So it has to be replenished at the end of the year. We're getting really close to the cap. In fact, now I'm pretty confident after Friday, I think we're at the cap. I think we've maxed out the cap. We had kind of been guessing and doing some estimates. I thought we were maybe 3 million away. Turns out we were closer to 9 million away from the cap, billion. But nonetheless, we were really close. And then the other part of that was that 9.5 billion allocated to the Office of the Secretary. Specific mention to livestock, including dairy, specialty crop producers, and producers that grow food for local programs like schools, hospitals, businesses of that sort. So, and then the rest of them, nutrition and SNAP programs, those are really to provide additional funds for increased uses of the accounts, not increased benefits. We've been getting some questions about, hearing news about more money for SNAP recipients. It's actually, right now, we're still in the case where these dollars that are allocated are just for increased enrollment. People going on to unemployment insurance, now qualifying for SNAP. They're expected that the program's going to take on more participants, therefore more dollars. And so just kind of want to lay out the picture, because now we're diving into what this all looks like. Up till now, we just knew the dollar amounts. Now we're starting to look into it. So David, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide for me, I'd appreciate it. Maybe. Is it going to go for me?
Yeah, I'm trying right now. It's giving me fits for some reason. There we go.
Oh,
Sorry.
there we go. Step back. So this slide's really busy, and I do apologize. My high school business teacher, Jill Fisher, would not be happy with me that I broke the 7 words and 7 lines on a slide. But I believe in maximizing space. And so anyways, you're getting a lot here, and I apologize. Up at the top, let's just start with the timeline. I've included some links. These slides will be posted on our website, the Farm Office Live, and we can get you that link. But this is where it's going to be. So these links are available to you if you want. But the University of Missouri last week came out with a report estimating that about a loss of 20 billion to the U.S. ag sector as of that current point. And that was also including future expectations in terms of where they saw price declines going. A big component of their estimates, and I want to make this clear, a big component of their estimates was not just losses as of now, but actually losses due to deteriorating income effects. So basically, they were taking into account, making an assumption based on what an economic recession would do to household income, and then using those estimates in terms of what does a loss of income at the household level mean for spending, especially in meats, meat and meat protein, basically, because as people lose money, or as we have less money to spend, we tend to buy less meat. So that's being figured in. That was a big part of their assessments. After that report came out, USDA was still trying to figure out how to divvy out these funds. So they submitted for commodity groups to submit proposals. We don't have what all those proposals are. Those are in some cases being held really close to the chest. The ones we did have, or that I was able to get a hold of, were beef, local foods, and then dairy. Local foods was very public. They released theirs right away, saying that they had a $9 billion hit to their industry. Beef had anywhere between $8 to $9.5 billion, but their request came out to about $9 billion. And then dairy's total program allocation that they were asking for was $5 billion. And Diane's going to talk about the dairy margin coverage, but that also included some money in there for increasing or opening up enrollment for dairy margin coverage. And Diane's going to talk about that later, but that was included in that $5 billion ask. Then, as David mentioned, on Friday, April 17th, President Trump and Secretary Perdue announced the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, or CFAP is what we're kind of calling it. And it's broken down into two parts, and I've got them listed here. It's $19 billion total. So keep in mind there was $9.5 billion in that bottom right hand corner. $9.5 billion to the Secretary's office. The remaining of the funds for that $19 billion are coming out of that Credit Commodity Corporation. So we're pretty much maxing out what we had left. The first component of it is $3 billion for USDA to purchase and distribute food. And that's being broken out into $1 million a piece of fresh produce, dairy, and meats. And they're going to buy 100 million of each, all three of those, each month for the foreseeable future. The goal is to buy that off the market, repackage it into bundles and boxes, and then deliver it to food banks, food assistance services, and of the likes. And so that's the food purchase and distribution. But probably more interesting to this group is the $16 billion in direct support for producers. And it's now mapped out. I've got that mapped out in the pie chart to the right. As you can see, cattle are getting 5.1 billion, dairy 2.9, hogs 1.6, row crops 3.9, specialty crops 2.1, and then other, which would, that other category is consuming a lot of things, because you don't see sheep on here, you don't see goats. That is included in that other category, right? So you got a lot of category and $500 million. Okay, so that's how the direct support is being divvied out. Now we don't know some of the actual logistics on how this is going to work, but USDA has indicated that the formula is there's going to be one payment. It's going to be one direct payment. It's going to be broken up into two parts. The first part is 85% of the losses between January 1st and April 15th. So whatever that loss is on certified production. And I should step back real quick. One of the things that was unique about this was they were very careful and very pointed in saying that these are actual losses. So we do have reason to believe, and it is kind of wildly accepted through the industry right now, that this is going to be based on actual production. So, if you think about Ark County and PLC payments, they're based on historical production. Dairy production is based on your historical dairy production that you have registered it with FSA as well. They've been very forthcoming and thorough in saying this is going to be based on actual production. So 85% of the loss between January 1st and April 15th per commodity. And then 30% of the expected losses between April 15th and the next two quarters. So basically through October, or start of October is kind of what we're looking at there for the next two quarters. So they'll combine that together. The 30% will be forecasted values. The 85% will be based on time series, a price series. There is uncertainty about what price series they're actually going to use, but then there'll be one payment that then's paid out. A couple of observations I want to make before we move on. So on the cattle and the hog side, real quick, I've already been asked several times, how do you think they're going to characterize and come up with a value for how many hogs, how many cattle you sold during this period of time? If history would have anything to say, and again, this is where I'm kind of just giving my best estimate here. In the MFP program, the last round of the MFP program in 2019, producers were given a time window, 2 months, 3 months time window, and said, pick a date between this time window to certify your animals. That's how I'm feeling about this. I think that January 1st, April 15th time window will be find a day, during that week or that period where you can certify your animals, whether that's through production records, sales records, feed records, however, and that's how this payment will be made for hogs and cattle. Now you might be asking, and we'll get to it here in a second, hogs have taken a huge hit. Biggest commodity, or that are the commodity that's lost the most. Why isn't hogs getting more money in comparison to cattle? Well, only about 2% of our hogs are actually cash negotiated. In fact, some weeks it drops down to below 1%. They're only, so very few are cash negotiated. Whereas on the cattle side, almost all of our cow-calf operations are cash negotiated. So therefore, there's more exposure, more opportunities for risk in cattle and cow-calf operations when you're looking at just the beginning of the supply chain. Now, when you get further along in the cattle supply chain, especially at like the feeder level, they're a lot of times hedging a feeder contract with a live contract, right? Pigs, kind of same type of situation. Most of them are contract negotiated. Very few of them are cash negotiated. The other thing I'll point out here real quick, specialty crops indicated that they had suffered a $5 billion loss. They only got 2.1. So there's not near as much money to the specialty crop sector as what they were hoping for. That's going to be challenging when they try to figure out, okay, how to use these dollars in a way that actually provides benefit, but also services a wide scope of people. That's going to be a challenge. And then I have two more points. They're both related to row crops. Our last round of the market facilitation payments was $16 billion. This time it's $4 billion. Okay, so that $16 billion that we had in the last round of the MFP program, the market facilitation program, returned anywhere between 55 and 80 bucks an acre here in Ohio. You drop that down a fourth, right, which is effectively what this is, meaning that at most, at the very most, a lot of our Ohio crop producers are probably looking at somewhere between 16 and 20 bucks or 15 and 20 bucks, right? So a lot less than what we had seen before. Right now, I'm looking at this and kind of estimating a loss of $50 per acre, given where we were a couple of months ago to where we are now in terms of new crop. That's including a couple of changes in terms of inputs. But you look at that $50, now we're only getting $15, $20 back. This is not making us whole. This program's not making us whole. And I think that's what that's what Secretary Perdue, a lot of his comments have said is, there's just not enough money to go around. We're going to need another round of support to really help folks, but we don't know when that's going to come, right? My last comment I'll make about kind of these direct payments is ethanol was left out. So ethanol has been one of the biggest hit commodity sector or energy sectors that have a commodity energy component. And ethanol was left out. The statement that was made about ethanol was there's just not enough money to go around. USDA has kind of consistently, the last couple of years, not really given any support to ethanol. I think a lot of corn producers would like to see some support to ethanol because ethanol is what drives corn demand. So if you're helping the end consumer, you're helping corn producers as well. When could these checks come out, or when could this program get up and running? Well, USDA is going to try to get it running as fast as possible. What we've heard in terms of quotes is sometime by the end of May is when we could see a lot of these benefits coming out. But again, they're expecting a need for more market support or some type of other market facilitation payment to come this summer. So that's what I have to say about this. We don't know a lot of details in terms of how some of this is going to get certified. My assumption, I got called about this a couple times this weekend. My assumption is that if you were a prevent plant in 2019, you're probably not going to be eligible for this because it's going to be based on your actual production that you had during this period of time. Same way as if you had sold your grain ahead. I'm not really sure what the benefit's going to be for those producers that have already sold just because you didn't have any grain that worked into this market downturn as we look ahead. So. David, would you mind going to the next slide real quick?
Sure, Ben. One question before you move forward. You noted that Local Foods asked for $5 billion. What did they end up? And I see the other only had about 500 million. Does that mean Local Foods did not get even close to the request, or do you not know?
It would be included in the specialty crop.
Okay, so it's part of specialty crop. Okay.
It would be included in the specialty crop section. Part of it's also included in the other as well. But then that other, we're getting indication that it's also going to include some of these livestock groups that, because sheep took a big hit. People overlook that the biggest day for lamb processing happened right in the middle of this coronavirus, and that was Easter, right? And that's one of the biggest days for lamb marketing, and it didn't materialize for them. And so lamb is going to be in that other category. Same way with poultry, it'll fit in that other category as well. But yeah, local foods will fall in that specialty crop section.
And you also mentioned that it probably is not going to be on the base acres. So does that indicate that if I'm a producer that has not been in the federal farm program previously, that I would be eligible for this program?
So short answer is, I don't know. I don't know what the eligibility standards are going to be. My guess is it's going to be very similar to the market facilitation program. I think you're going to see a lot of parallels with the market facilitation program, especially the 20. I think this round of support that I'm talking about right now, I think is going to look very similar to the 2018 version of market facilitation, where you had to certify your bushels, you had to certify your animals. There was a per unit payment that was then paid out based on what you had. That's how I see this going, this section right here. Now, there's been indication, and again, we have that $14 billion sitting in the Commodity Credit Corporation that'll get replenished in June. Purdue keeps mentioning that will be needed for additional support. Couple of things about this that make me a little nervous. One is if that's tied to actual production, right, then we start looking at how much does this incentivize plantings, acreage intentions, right? I think a lot of people would look back at last year and say that announcement of the market facilitation payments in May actually incentivized, and it did, right? Like, we even got calls here at Ohio State asking questions about how big those payments were going to be, because that was the difference between planting and not planting in a lot of cases. I think that same effect is going to happen again this year, to where they've already cast the die in the water, indicating that it's coming. I don't think they can take it back. That would be, political. I mean, that's something politicians don't do, is if they if they mention and indicate money, they don't reserve it back. The question becomes, what does that look like this summer? And I think that looks more like the 2019 version, where it's not tied to what you actually planted, but you had to plant something or have certain animals, or it's based on a unit rather than the actual commodity produced. So
great, Ben. This generated some discussion in our chat feature, and the first
Excellent.
question comes from Keith, and Keith asks, and I think it's more of a clarification. So when you're talking about losses between that January 1st and April 15th period, does the actual loss mean actual sales from the January 1 to April 15th period for row crops? So in other words, no sales means no payment, or does that mean I had corn and beans sitting in the bin that I could have marketed, but I didn't because of reduction? Same with cows and beef.
Yeah, so I think so. The way it appears to me, and again, I think we've got two versions of this program coming. I think this round is going to be based on what you have left to sell, and so again, and keep in mind, we're talking about 3.9 billion, which 3.9 billion is no small. I mean, that's no small amount. I mean, I would love to have 3.9 billion, but that's not enough to pay out across the country for what we've got left. I started doing some back of the envelope calculations today. That's not a whole lot left, given how much we had in storage in some parts of the country. I think it's just going to be paid on what people had left to sell rather than what had been sold earlier. Now, the second round of this coming this summer, potentially, again, we don't know what that looks like. I think that'll be based on what you actually planted, and not based. But again,
so if I sell everything at harvest, sold it at harvest in 2019, then that means probably in this round there won't be a payment.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting.
But
same way with
details
like
to come.
prevent plant, right? So you took prevent plant in 2019, you don't have anything to sell during this period.
Okay, so the next question shifts gears a little to the food bank side, and the question from an anonymous attendee says, will the 3 billion USDA purchases be grant dollars to food banks to purchase the fresh produce from growers and distributors?
It's going to be both. So it's going to be they're going to buy. Well, actually, that 300 million is actually, so the 100 million a month from dairy, meat, and fresh produce. That'll be USDA spending that money and then delivering the produce to food banks. Now, there is a possibility it could come down the road. If you have a local producer down the road, that they buy from them, package it, and then deliver it to food banks. There is that possibility. There's also some money here just in terms of logisticals, and I didn't put this slide in. It's actually in our slide deck from last week where we talked about some of the administrative support for USDA. There was indication in the press release that that money that had been given to USDA to help facilitate some of these programs, that money would be given to food banks as grants to then buy produce from local vendors and producers of the likes. So
Okay.
yes to both. That's the answer.
Great. We'll let people ruminate on what you just said, and then we'll just keep with no more questions in our chat box. So we'll move to your next slide. And then don't hesitate if you have more questions as you think about that to drop them in and we'll handle those.
Yep. So my last slide here before I turn it back over, I think Barry's next, is I had been showing it from January 21st. The reason I picked January 21st, that was the first date that a case was confirmed in the United States, was January 21st. A lot of people use the 14th, January 14th, because that was the day that the guy actually came back from China. I don't think that that's a fair estimate because the market didn't know he had coronavirus at that point. The market didn't know he had coronavirus till the 21st. So I had been using the 21st. However, the program eligibility for the program I just mentioned, the CFAP, requires that a commodity has at least a 5% decline from January 1st through April 15th. And so I've moved our scale now to January 1st. Now, there is some uncertainty on what these contracts, in terms of what price series they use. What I've used here is I've used the most accurate contract for each date. So I have not picked, for instance, like on corn, I have not used the June or the July contract for the whole March, and then I've used the next May contract up till May, then July, right? Is how this is working. So again, it's maybe a little bit uncertain, but we started at the major commodity that we would associate with here in Ohio is that's not making the cuts, wheat. Everything else seems to be making the cut. Wheat's the only one that might not make the cut and be an eligible commodity. Again, you see hogs there with the biggest decline, followed not too far behind with milk and cattle, but our grains definitely not near as deep as what the livestock sector is or the energy sector, and that's why I don't think we've seen the support and the direct assistance support that we saw. So again, you had to have a 5% decline to qualify. We don't know what price series they'll use, but they've only mentioned most reflective. I think most reflective represents the most current or the most active contract, because that's how cash prices are set. They're set on basis of the most nearby futures contract. My only recommendation for all producers, and if you are a producer, if you advise producers, if you have neighbors that are producers, here would be my recommendation: document everything. If you sell cattle, document that. Put that in somewhere where you can find it. If you're dumping milk, document it. Keep that somewhere, and I know Diane will probably echo that here in a bit. Corn, soybeans, wheat. If you're selling that because you've got low quality grain in the bin and it needs to move before it spoils in the bin, to document that. We don't know how they're going to do some of these things. I told you, I think on the livestock side, they're going to give you a range and you pick a date, and that's where you certify your livestock. On the grain side, I think you're going to have to prove that you had a lot of this on hand and you didn't sell it back in December and January, or December and November. So that would be my words of advice, and I'll stop there. That's all I really have to say at this point. Again, we'll keep you updated as we learn more at Ohio State, but that's what I've got as of the moment. So,
okay,
I see
Ben.
Mike, yeah.
We do have, yeah, you see the question, and I'll repeat it there so it makes sure everyone sees it. Have you ran any ARC PLC scenarios for Ohio yet just looking at the futures minus our historical basis, it looks like sure bet that the market year average price will be below the reference price for the last part of 19 marketing year and the first half of the 2020 marketing year. And then Rory also asked 5% decline in price as of what date? Just
Yeah,
you see
so
that.
for Rory's, that one's easy. 5% decline since January 2nd. So between January 2nd, so this graph here, they basically put a bound between January 2nd because the 1st is a holiday. We don't, and then April 15th. So that's represented in this graph. I'm not including anything after the 15th. This is the price series that I think makes the most sense. Again, the term USDA is using is most reflective. So that this, some people, the contract we're operating with now and go back. So you could use the July futures contract and all the data points would be relative to the July corn futures contract. I'm using the most active at each point. So in February and January, we're basing that off the March futures contract. So I think that's where this is coming in right here. Now, Mike, your question, yes, I have ran it for, you start looking at corn for Ohio. We're the period of falling below that 370 reference price. 2019, keep in mind, we're still in the 2019 marketing year. We had higher prices. Keep in mind, we had those $4 cash prices in September, October, and then it kind of fell as we moved into harvest, got a little better in January. We spent most of January above $4. We're right at $4. Keep in mind, this is a national price, so there was other places in the country that are really weak basis. A good chunk of our crop had been marketed at levels above 380, 385. Now the back end of this, given how much we still had in storage, the back end of this is where we start looking and saying, okay, how much can we weight that against, or how much quantity do we have against certain prices? And USDA dropped their estimate for corn down to 360. So we're 10 cents below the reference price. So if that becomes real, which I actually think, given what we've seen the last couple of days, that could be even a little bit high still. So 355, 360 for the 2019 reference price, that's 10, 15 cents below the reference price. Throw 15 cents against 170 bushels. That's, what is that? Is that $8? 170, hold on, I'm doing math in my head. This is always scary. Yeah, so a little over 25 bucks. Did I do that right? Hold on. Yeah, 25 bucks, $25.50. So that's what you're looking at an acre with a 15-cent price decline for 2019. Now, 2020, again, we'll start in September. Given where our prices are right now, we'd have to have significant increases in prices for the PLC program to not pay anything. So I think producers that chose PLC for corn are going to like that option. It's going to provide some needed support both this coming fall and then I think the fall after. Now on the soybean side, soybeans have actually held pretty good. We're only seeing a 12% decline there. A lot of that's due to strong crushing margins. Also, soybeans there was some quality issues with soybeans as well. So you look at USDA's forecasted price for soybeans right now, it's at 365. The reference price for soybeans, 840. So we're still 25 cents above the soybean reference price for the current marketing year. So we'd have to lose quite a bit on soybean price to trigger, but at least on the corn side, yeah, we're looking at $20, $25 PLC payments on corn right now. So any other questions?
Great, and we'll let people formulate some questions and we'll take questions as we go. And I want to move back to the next topic, which Barry, we're going to put you on deck here, but we've been talking the last 2 weeks a lot about the CARES Act and components within that. And last week when we sat here, Barry, we were talking about the program, Paycheck Protection Program, was going to probably run out of money, and it did by, I believe, Wednesday of last week. And now we know Congress is working, trying to get a deal to add more money to that. As of the time I think we went live here tonight, they still haven't been able to pass that. But that looks like that's coming this week to that. But we also had some guidance on sole proprietorship and some other questions that came in. So Barry, I know you have a couple slides here that you want to share some of the progress or some of the update of the CARES Act as where we stood from last Monday.
Right. Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, you hit it on the head as far as kind of waiting to see on what's going to happen with more money. There's been a lot of news articles out over the weekend and today telling us a little bit about what's going on with Congress, and the Senate is trying to find some agreement as far as coming up with additional money to replenish the Paycheck Protection Program pool. Boy, that's a lot of P's. That's a tongue twister almost. But we ran out, and that was last week, just right after we finally had clear guidance, or I should say clearer guidance for those self-employed people without employees. So what we ended up with was getting those rules, and then the pool ran out. So a lot of, there were a lot of loan applications in the pipeline that did not get submitted onto Small Business Administration from the lenders that had them on behalf of their producers and other business owners. So where we are now, we'll take a look at some of the dollar amounts that are being discussed, at least in the Senate. And they're expecting perhaps to vote tomorrow on this. But in the meantime, let's talk about those interim rules. The interim rules came out last Tuesday, and these were interim final rules for self-employed. You're going to be eligible for a paycheck protection loan if you were in operation on February 15th. You were an individual with self-employment income, principal place of business in the U.S., and you filed or will file a Form 1040 Schedule C for 2019. And this is where a lot of confusion starts for those of us that are either farmers or work with farmers, because it's very explicit in these interim final rules that it says is Schedule C. So does that leave us out, those that are working with Schedule F filers? And well, we think not. We try to interpret that, or I guess maybe in a biased way, we interpret that to include Schedule Fs for 2019. And I think we're reasonably safe with that assertion. And it depends a little bit on which individual bank that you might work with. So there's a lot of discussion still ongoing about this. We think that it's safe ground to go ahead and file that application if you are a Schedule F filer. They're titling this Owner Compensation Replacement, and it's focused only on self-employment income, which presents some problems in itself, especially with the way farmers are, well, the way that farmers have a different mix of income due to the new tax law, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which we've talked about in various meetings over the last couple of years. And David, you've been in on this too, and you've discussed this with some of your groups that you've been in front of too. But with the new Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we have a lot more income being declared by farms that is coming from Form 4797 with the equipment trade-in and all that goes on with that. And with the new law, we're showing a lot more income from that particular form, which isn't subject to self-employment tax, rather than the Schedule F. So if you want to go on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the pool of money, we've seen this being discussed. Right now, at least, the number that I've been hearing the most is about $300 billion to replenish the pool. Now, this goes along with a larger package that also includes some money that will replenish the EIDL program, and that is the Emergency injury disaster loan program. So that money will go to replenish that. Then there's some money also targeted for hospitals, around 75 billion, and testing, 25 billion. So that's at least the last numbers that I've seen. Some of the rest of you may have seen some more updated numbers, but from what I can tell, at least today, they're going to at least attempt to try to pass this legislation tomorrow. So we'll know probably a lot more tomorrow as far as whether or not that money's going to be there. So then the question becomes, should we still prepare and submit an application? I think that's the next logical question, because we saw how quickly this first pool ran out. It went pretty quickly. And if we have Schedule F income, we think that we are eligible. We meet all those criteria in that previous slide. Then we can submit an application through our local lender. One problem may come up, and that is what we just talked about, is that the different mix of income may leave a farmer with very little Schedule F income. If that's the case, then the question may pop up, should I refile? Should I consider refiling a 2019 income tax return if I've already filed earlier this winter? And then you have to start doing some math. You know, what's it going to cost me to refile this tax return? Is it going to be substantial enough with changing the mix of income? And the big way that a farmer could perhaps do that is just to declare less depreciation, less expensing on the depreciation side, whether it's less Section 179 or bonus depreciation or regular MACRS depreciation. If you do declare less of that, you're likely going to have a little bit higher tax bill due. So if you're going to refile, you're going to have to consider that. So that's something, there's going to be a little bit of give and take there. Just to qualify for that PPP loan, you may have to refile and pay more tax. One of the things that's been discussed is beyond whether, first of all, whether Schedule Fs do qualify, and we think that they do, even though it's not explicitly stated in those guidelines, is whether or not the SBA, Small Business Administration, will reverse some of their language in the rules and allow farmers to include that trade-in, machinery trade-in income. Right now, we don't think so. You know, we're fairly confident that that's not included. So the only way to, you know, to see that included would be to have some change in rules. And we don't see that forthcoming, at least not right now. I know there's some lobbying efforts that are going on, but we don't know, we haven't seen any positive signs. So that leads us back to the previous point. That third point is, if that's not going to be eligible, and you do decide that you want to go ahead and submit, you may have to consider refiling your taxes to bring a little bit more self-employment income into the picture from 2019 to allow you to have enough income to qualify or to make it worth your while. Two other points, at least from what we know from the rules, LLCs and partnerships, those filings have to take place at those entity levels. So if you have, for instance, if you're a partner in several partnerships, we're not clear at this point as to how this filing may take place. But if you're a partner in a partnership, the partnership itself is going to be the entity that has to file, in this case, this PPP loan request. So both LLCs that are filing as partnerships and partnerships themselves are going to have to go through this. And there's some additional detail that we could go into, but for the sake of time, I think we'll leave it at that, at least for now, especially on that Paycheck Protection Program. So let's go on, I guess, David, unless you want to add anything else to that. You're good?
I'm good. I was thinking as you were talking, Barry, that we have yet to figure out all the nuances of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And here we have to figure out, as financial professionals and tax preparers, yet another set of mystery type of legislation. So people might not, I think we give a lot of credit to other folks, but our financial professionals are really working overtime on this too to help folks out.
They definitely are. Yeah. And lenders as well. You know, lenders are getting paid. There's a certain percentage that they're getting paid to work with these loans, but still be sure to thank those folks because many of them are working a lot of extra time. The last thing that I'll mention, and this is included in the original bill, and we had pretty clear rules and guidelines from this particular part of the CARES Act earlier on when it was passed. It's Section 2301, but it's the employee retention credit for employers subject to closure due to COVID-19. So that's a mouthful, right? But boiling it down, it allows eligible employers a fully refundable payroll tax credit equal to 50% of qualified wages paid to employees for each calendar quarter during the crisis. Now, this is different than the tax credits that we outlined in the first Farm Office Live meeting, where we were talking about tax credits that you could take as an employer if you or your employee had to take sick leave or take family leave to care for your children. So this is a little bit different. This is in case or in the instance where your business may see a slowdown. So simply an economic slowdown, you will be eligible for tax credits that you can take advantage of. So you see there that second bullet point, an employer becomes an eligible employer under significant decline in gross receipts. So that's fairly vague, right? But they go on to explain it in a little bit more detail. The test during the first calendar quarter for which gross receipts for that quarter are less than 50% of gross receipts for the same calendar quarter in the prior year. So it's fairly clear there. So I think the test is going to be, well, it's certainly measurable. Then the question becomes, and I know that there have been those that have explored this possibility is, okay, what if I just shift income around to take advantage of this? And that may be scrutinized. We really don't know how closely they're going to look at some of these businesses that take advantage of this particular provision, and whether they're just shifting income around from quarter to quarter, or whether it's a true slowdown due to the COVID-19. I think we don't know yet what kind of oversight is going to actually occur when this is all said and done. But there may be some farms that certainly will legitimately fall under this significant decline definition. So it's something to consider. Now, if you take advantage of one of these, the PPP loan, it makes you ineligible for this particular employee retention credit, and vice versa. If you take the employee retention credit, it does make you ineligible for the PPP loan. So one or the other at this point. So I'll answer any questions, but if there aren't any, I'll leave it at that.
Barry, so your recommendation, I know we've had some producers think, should I get in there and make an application? Your advice would definitely get in there, make the application, because once they pass this, then I know there's a lot in the pipeline that are sitting there that didn't get funded on the first round of the PPP, but there is hope that some others might get funded going forward.
That's the hope. We don't know. Also, we really don't know how many are sitting there in the pipeline, that haven't been submitted, that are sitting in some of these banks and are just waiting to be submitted to the Small Business Administration when the funds are replenished, if they are. We're assuming that the Congress, Senate will go ahead and pass something tomorrow. We don't know. So then it becomes an issue of, a couple of things, I think. First of all is you have to look at your tax return if you've already filed and see what kind of income or the mix of income. If it's not much Schedule F income, then you're going to have to, first of all, think about refiling, filing again. And then second of all, do you have the time to go through all this? Because, you know, it's not costless. It does take some time, especially at this time of the year when you've got lots of folks that are, you know, under a time crunch anyway. So it's really, in my mind, it is a bit of a tough call because there may be nothing, there may be no payoff in the end. There's no guarantees at this point. So do we urge people to do this with that possibility? Well, I think people need to surely consider it, talk to their lender and see what kind of a process that they may have to go through. We also know from the guidelines and the way we understand the rules is you are going to be able to declare your Schedule F income plus your employees. If you have 1 or 2 employees, then that's going to be an additional amount that's forgivable. That's the way we are interpreting the guidelines, at least. And I think we're on safe ground there.
Great. Now, Barry, I just want to maybe going to be a lot going forward for tax professionals to deal with. You want to give a plug about, here we are, we're in April, but your tax schools that you lead aren't that far off. Do you want to give a plug about what's going to go on with those or anything about? I saw some information starting to trickle out on that.
Yeah, we were talking, you and I and the rest were talking earlier too about what we might expect for Ohio State University and the state as a whole as far as some of these restrictions being lifted. And we don't know yet. No one knows for sure. But as far as educational types of offerings, you know, we will have our tax schools in the fall for professionals. We will have a number of those provided we do have clearance to offer those. But we're also going to be offering some virtual schools this year, which will be the first time. So even if we do fall under some restrictions as far as holding large meetings or social distancing, or, you know, some of those things are still in place. We are planning to have offerings, educational opportunities virtually or in settings where we can have social distancing take place. So we have plans in place. Julie and I have been talking about all the different possibilities for this upcoming fall. I know it's a long way away, but it's going to be on us pretty quickly. And we do hope to offer a summer update like we did last year. And as of now, we are strongly considering making that a virtual school in early August. So we'll have more details out here in the next month or two.
Great. So you'll have a summer update that people can log on to and get on. That might be virtual. Just had it's not a question or an answer, Barry, but just like an update that one of our colleagues had a farmer get in the first round of PPP and his loan was over 16,000. So he had a super lender working with him through that process. So looks like some of our ag folks are taking advantage of the PPP.
I'm just curious, I was going to ask Mike if he wanted to chime in. What was does he know the makeup of that loan submission? Was it for employees that this particular farmer had, or was it his own self-employment income plus employees? I'm just curious if he does. If you don't know, Mike, that's fine. Maybe that's something that wasn't offered, but well, it's employees. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
And just as a plug for your tax schools, for those that haven't been there, just go to go.osu.edu/tax schools. And you can get more details about the summer update and the tax schools that will be coming along. So go.osu.edu/tax schools. There's your commercial. I didn't even charge you for that commercial, Barry. So
well, David's
that's a good day for you.
Dave's a big part of the tax education program in Ohio as well. So thanks, David.
All right, Ben, I think you want to pop in a poll question here. Let's just get some interaction with our attendees.
We're going to do 2 polls, actually. If I can slip 2 in here. Okay, so I'm going to launch the poll. It should pop up on your screen. Let me know if you don't see it. This question is, in the last week, has your outlook on the ag economy changed? Are you more optimistic, unchanged, more pessimistic, or uncertain? And while we're waiting for the results to come in, I'll also put a plug in for Barry. I went to his tax school last year and loved it. It was awesome. The food was excellent. I went to the Plain City one at Der Dutchman. It was really good. And the entertainment was great. Barry did a good job.
Well, there's going to be plenty to talk about this year, no doubt. You won't fall asleep.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And I'm going to share the results. So 54% of you said you were more pessimistic, 13% uncertain, unchanged, and then more optimistic, 8% more optimistic. I tell you what, after seeing oil prices today, it's hard to get more pessimistic than the oil prices were today. I think they finished it down $40, I think. Or negative $40, meaning that people were paying people to buy or to take away their oil. Okay, now we're going to do, so that was the first one. Now we're going to do market facilitation or similar. Basically, this is back to my slides just a little bit earlier. Do you think the 19 billion is going to be not enough, about right, more than enough, or no opinion? We'll give a couple minutes for this to come in.
I think you just wanted an almost near unanimous selection when you wrote that question, Ben.
Well, I actually intended, I messed up. I was going to do this one first. I was going to do the poll before I did my slides, and I forgot. Actually, you reminded me, so we're just going to throw this in here just in case. All right, we're getting pretty close to having just about everybody. Give it 10 more seconds. All right, we're going to go ahead and end the poll. So 80% of you said not enough. Only 16% said no opinion, and 4% said more than enough. So with that, we can go on. Thank you.
Yeah, Ben, you can tell we have the young techie on our team to do the polls. And we also remind you, if you haven't been on before, one thing is you exit tonight's meeting, Ben has put a quick little survey out for you to be able to answer a few questions. But most importantly, that's your time to ask some questions that you might have thought of that you would like the team to answer next Monday evening. So we look at those questions, we analyze those, and that's how we build the program for each Monday evening. So we just plug in for Ben's poll or survey that you'll do on your way out. Speaking of which, a nice segue to our dairy, and the dairy margin coverage was a question that came up about, and I think Ben might have hinted to it, but is our Diane Shoemaker, are they going to put more money back into the dairy margin coverage program?
Well, this is a very brief update, and the answer is no.
Next.
Yeah, next. To put a little perspective on that, it was reopened for 2019, and I think that's part of why it was included in the ask as industry people went to the USDA with, here's how we'd like you to spend that money on the dairy industry. And one of those suggestions was to reopen that program. The program was originally created in the 2014 Farm Bill and was pretty flawed. And so over the following years, there were some tweaks made to it, and the most substantial were made after the 2019 sign up closed in 2018. So then in our last Farm Bill, when those changes weren't really made in time for people to know what the options were, it included options of margin coverage up to $9.50, where it had previously been $8. So they did reopen the program early in 2019, and the nice feature about that is people could sign up for that retroactive to the first of the year. And it's kind of easy to forget when we ended 2019 on a high note in the dairy industry that in January and February last year, milk prices were well below $14. So it was a pretty ugly time as well. So the program was reopened then, and there was substantial sign up. But to participate in 2020, farmers had to make that decision. The latest to sign up was in December of last year. And because the projections look so good, we didn't get as much sign up for 20 as we had for 2019. So Secretary Perdue indicated that it would not be reopened, that it is out there to serve as an insurance type program. And if it's reopened, then it kind of defeats that purpose. So unfortunately, that will not be an option for farms to sign up retroactively, but there is the 2.9 billion that was allocated in the CARES Act funding. But at this point, we just don't know how that will be divvied out or what formulas they'll use, or if that will cover any of the milk that has had to be dumped. I would just make one other comment about that. It come to my attention this weekend that there is an Ohio processor who sent a letter to their producers that indicated they were not going to pool all of the milk that comes into their plant, and that they would be adjusting the prices to all producers to make up for that, which means they're not going to be getting the class 3 price plus the producer price differential on all of the milk they sell to that shipper. I don't believe anyone has been asked to dump there. They're just not going to pool all of the milk on the federal order, and that will lower the overall price available to all their farmers. So processors are addressing things in different ways.
So it's either doing that, Diane, or dumping milk. And has there been more milk that was dumped this week, or has that slowed down a little bit? We talked about that heavily 2 weeks ago.
Right. And last week there were some reports of some milk being dumped. I don't believe as extensively as had been the week before, but it just basically people have to call and let us know that that's happening. But the big question mark for all the farms who were dumping milk still is, will I get paid and how much? The federal milk marketing order system does not pay for milk. That is, there's not a fund there that will pay for milk or insist that farms get paid a certain price.
Could part of that 2.9 billion be used for that, or have you heard any tea leaves on what kind of structure they might have to help our dairy farm families through some of that money?
Yeah, I haven't heard any specifics. Those haven't been released yet, but one of the requests was that there might be some kind of restitution partially for dumped milk, but we just don't know at this point.
So something we're going to have you keep a pulse on as we move forward the next few weeks, just to see what transpires with that program, for sure, for dairy farmers.
Yeah, hopefully.
Because the futures haven't looked pretty the last week, the nearby futures.
No, May is still sometimes dipping into the $10 territory, which is horrendously ugly.
So I'm going to eat some ice cream after we get off of here to do my part to help. I think that would be a good thing.
And the real frustration, well, one of the frustrations is that we're still getting reports that retail is limiting purchases of dairy product or just doesn't have much on the shelf. And milk is out there. And unfortunately, then sometimes the general public thinks that farmers are dumping milk to push prices up. And that is absolutely not the case.
Not the case. Great. All right, Diane, we appreciate you keeping your pulse on that. So we'll move right to the next one. And Ben, there's this thing called WHIP. I feel whipped after the last couple weeks, but this is something that's new to Ohio farmers. What's something that we're going to have to learn about? And I even think our local farm service agency offices are still trying to wrap their head around the administration of this program too. So what's up with this program?
Yeah, and so Ohio producers are actually, I mean, they're maybe not familiar with this. We're going to have to learn about new rules, but they're actually a little closer tied to it than what they may think. So if we think back to 2019, right? I know we don't like to think on 2019, and I constantly get harassed because I make people think back to 2019 in terms of our planting decisions and our marketing and styles, and they don't like that. They're like, stop making this thing about 19. there was this little thing that happened towards the end of the year, right? That came and we got a top up payment. That's what we called them on our crop insurance. So if you had prevent plant payments, and you could get an extra 10% on your top of your prevent plant insurance, or 15% if you had the harvest price option, right? You remember those? Some of you might remember that or remember hearing about the 15% top up payment. Well, that all came through the disaster bill that President Trump signed in June and July. I can't remember, it was June of last year. And that was part of this WIP program. It all kind of came at the same point where there was these top up programs and payments, and then there was these WIP options as well. I have to admit, the first time, and I have a really hard time looking at this acronym and not thinking about baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan, and we use that WIP acronym in baseball too. And so anyways, it's one of those things I have a hard time looking at and not thinking about baseball. So again, my high school business teacher would just cringe over this slide, but nonetheless, I got it down to one slide. You all should be proud of me. I got down to one slide. Basically what happened is the disaster bill that was passed last year made crop producers eligible for excess moisture and drought. And that's usually not the case. Usually it's limited to wildfires and hurricanes. In June, it was made possible for excess moisture and then drought past the D3, D4 stage in the drought monitor. So that actually gives us in Ohio the option to be a part of this program. Now 2018 was a year where we don't think we had a lot of moisture, but the southeastern part of the state, they had quite a bit of moisture, and a lot of those counties qualified in 2018. So you could have signed up a little bit last year. A lot of producers didn't because, again, we still had some limitations in terms of what was eligible. But this year, we're going to have a lot more producers that are eligible for this program. It's available to crop producers, but that's even a little too shallow. If you have trees, if you're a forester and or an arborist and you have trees, or if you have bushes that grow berries, or you have vines for wine, you would qualify for this program too. So I have crop producers listed there in the first slide, and I've already misled you because it would be crop producers, vines for berries, trees, and bushes, basically. The only group really is livestock. Livestock has their own programs that relate to this as well. You think of like the livestock disaster assistance. That would be kind of the equivalent of this. So livestock, not a part of this. Enrollment has started, and this is one of those tricky things that for a lot of people across the country, I think Illinois is going to put an article out tomorrow because their members are getting asked questions about it. We're getting asked questions about it here in Ohio because FSA put this in their newsletter. So if you're on the FSA, the Farm Service Agency state newsletter, it was in the April newsletter that came out a week and a half ago, and it kind of caught me off guard a little bit too because I kind of forgot that we had another round to go. But enrollment started on March 23rd of 2020. We don't know what the deadline's going to be. So my recommendation would just be to get in early, or if you're at all interested, call in and get earlier. If you have producers, encourage them to call in. Because if you look at this map over here to the right, all of our counties are eligible in 2019. So every county in Ohio is eligible for this program except for Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County is the only one that's not eligible. All the rest are eligible. The purple counties are ones that are eligible in 18 and 19. And so they're there as well. FSA does not have the application window up yet, or how do I want to put this? They have the form out, but they don't have the software built to start processing those applications. But you can still call your FSA office and ask them about WIP Plus. Call in your local FSA office to apply. A lot of them still are operating, and I think they have certain limits in terms of how many people they can have in the office at a time. But whether you go in or whether you call, you can call in and apply now. And they just kind of need to know your name, how many acres you think are eligible. They need a couple other information. I've got it kind of here in this application section right in the middle where they're just going to ask you, are you conservation compliant? Do you meet the wetlands prohibit, basically saying I didn't take wetlands out of wetlands to become crop production. They're going to ask you your crop, the type of, irrigated, non-irrigated practice, and then intended use. And again, insurance records do count for this. Now, the one hitch is that if you do participate in this, you do have to buy crop insurance or NAP, which is non-insured agriculture protection. But basically, it's just if You would use NAP if there isn't an insurance product for your crop in your county. So if you think of like a lot of our fruit and vegetables or something, they don't have a crop insurance product, so they use NAP. If you do participate in this, you got to either enroll in NAP or crop insurance at least a 60% coverage level for the next 2 eligible years. Now, the reason I say the next 2 eligible years, and I've got this as a bullet point somewhere, I guess I took it off, but our insurance date is already behind us for 2020, right? You had to sign up for crop insurance on March 15th. The enrollment for this program didn't start till March 23rd. So therefore, initially there was some confusion about, hey, if I didn't enroll in crop insurance for 2020, am I no longer eligible for 19? Well, no. But if you do participate in this program, you'd have to buy crop insurance or NAP at least a 60% coverage level in 2021 and 2022. Now, we're still getting some details on the payments, but basically I've got the formula listed down there. It's the expected value of your crop times a WIP factor. That WIP factor is, there's a set WIP factor for each percentage coverage level of crop insurance. And I didn't put the chart on here, but I'm glad to get that for anybody that wants to see it. Basically, the higher level of your coverage, the higher the percent WIP factor. But you just take the expected value of your crop, price times quantity, multiply it by that WIP factor. Then we're going to subtract out anything you harvested. And then we're going to subtract out any crop insurance indemnity. And that value has to be above that. So another way to think about it is, did I still lose money on my crop if I take out what I harvested and what I got in insurance payments? Okay, so the only thing we know at this point is the WIP factor. We don't know how they're going to calculate those payment factors or those crop values, or how they're going to determine if a crop or what the crop was valued at. But this is a program that could be attractive to people, especially if you're in areas with high amounts of prevent plant. The reason why is because your prevent plant payments are capped at a certain rate, right? So you lost a good chunk of your crop. You didn't have any revenue from the crop to come back in, and you only got a certain prevent plant payment back. So there is potential there for some more assistance for the 2019 crop through this program. So this is a reason. This is kind of why I feel like the program I talked about earlier with the CFAP, the Corona and Food Ag program, whatever the Corona Food and Ag program. That's the reason why I don't think last year's crop, if you didn't have anything for last year's crop, I don't think that one's going to be of a benefit to you, because this is here for you. This is geared to, if you have additional losses beyond what you got in terms of revenue from 2019, I think you can utilize this program. If you go to this link down here, I've got a data source where it says farmers.gov/recover on the bottom of the graph or the bottom of the chart. If you go to that, it's got a little bit more information, but just so you know, we're still waiting on the payment factor and then how those crop values are going to be, but you can still call in and register your FSA office. And there's a form, and again, it's just how many crops, how many acres, type of practice, and intended use, which crop insurance records would count for that. So it's definitely something that I think Ohio producers should take a look at and consider, especially if you are in areas with large losses. The other thing that this program does is it also takes into account a quality loss. So if you had barley last year that didn't meet quality food grade barley, because it got too wet and you still harvested it, but you had to sell it as feed grade barley instead of quality barley, you can gain back some of those losses on that barley or the wheat. If you got wheat that you wanted, high protein wheat that you were planning on selling to a miller or something, you can pick up some value there too. So any questions about this?
Do you have a guess, Ben, when the deadline will be? Any offhand guess?
I do not know. USDA, FSA, I have a feeling it's going to have a lot of I seem to be saying this a lot lately. They just went through the gauntlet where they had CRP enrollment, MFP enrollment, ARC and PLC enrollment, and DMC enrollment all in like January and December of last year. Diane, do you remember those? You remember those days where we were doing everything? Our FSA offices, again, I know Barry said thank your lender. I would just echo and say thank your FSA agent too. Treat them really nice when you go in there. I have a feeling they're going to be doing a lot of this as well, because we're still doing general CRP sign up or general CRP sign up right now. They're going to have this WIP plus, and then I assume that those direct payments that I mentioned earlier are going to come through FSA as well. So the FSA office is going to be trying to stand up a lot of new programs here in the next couple of weeks. So I think they're going to be really busy, but no, I don't have a deadline.
Great. So a program that producers will need to keep their ears open for if they have questions, even though FSA may not know all the rules of the game right now, you can get your name in to where you can get a schedule for appointment if this is something that might be applicable to your farm. Good. Thank you, Ben.
It's a really simple process. I mean, I don't want to scare people away to think that this is as hard as what the ARC PLC sign up was. This is simply just getting your name on the register. They'll run the program. Again, we don't have those payment factors. So right now they're just going to have you fill out the form and eventually they'll run your numbers. If you're eligible for a payment, it'll just trigger a payment. There is no decision. You're not penalized other than if you do participate, then you have to participate in crop insurance. But if you normally do crop insurance to begin with, you're not losing anything. So.
Great. Well, one member of our team is down, and I mentioned about Peggy was going to do an update on unemployment compensation, as well as they've had some legal questions about garden centers and pop-up garden sales, home bakery items that Peggy has on her radar that she's getting some questions asked that we are going to move to the docket for next Monday night. So there's a little teaser. Before we get to questions, just a reminder that for more of this information, you can go to farmoffice.osu.edu for budgets and tax schools and dairy. Whether it's financial analysis, it's all on our farmoffice.osu.edu website. Of course, Ag Madness continues at 9, noon, and 3 every day. You can get on and watch the different programs, that extension on the agriculture and natural resource side that we're offering for producers and professionals across the state. Our KX, our Knowledge Exchange COVID-19 hub is live for people that want to get more information about COVID-19 response. We have our Ag Crisis website, as well as the Ohio Dairy Industry Resource Center. And I see that Julie is putting all these links in your chat box so you can cut and paste them at your leisure. So you have those. And then here's our contact information. I'm going to leave that there for a second, but I'm going to hit the stop share because I'm going to stop share, and that way we can come back as panelists. And there we are. So if you have questions, we will take your questions now before we close the meeting. So as you're thinking about it, as you're thinking about a question here, just as a reminder, I know one of our colleagues mentioned he couldn't be on the first two. Well, that's okay. If you missed last Monday's or 2 weeks ago, if you go to Farm Office Live, so go.osu.edu Farm Office Live. Did I get that right, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
Go.osu.edu // I can never, is that / or /? There's a slash, whatever it is. Farm Office Live. And you can not only register for next Monday's program, you also can go back tomorrow. Tonight's broadcast will be there. And if you missed the first two where we talked in depth on the CARES Act, you can go back those at your leisure. So the next rainy day that might come this week, you'll be able to log on and maybe review those if you wish. So is there any questions come through?
While we're waiting for questions, we could do another poll. Got 2 more polls. All right,
okay, you can put up a poll, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Go ahead, put the poll up.
Right,
I have
cool.
a question.
Okay, so this question is, do you think land prices will increase more than 5%, increase less than 5%, stay the same, decrease less than 5%, decrease more than 5%? We'll let you all answer, and then we're going to ask our land expert, Barry, to give his.
No pressure,
his
Barry.
question.
Cue it up.
We'll see if he agrees with the audience or not. Did I just take it away? It's kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? I want to ask the audience. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. Barry, what do you think? Do you have any insight into this before I share it?
Well, we've had some discussion. I mean, you and I think that there's going to be a lot of downward pressure on this just because of the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty. And there's just so much trouble with margins all across the sector, not only in crops, but livestock as well. So there's going to be pressure. There's going to be balance sheets that are going to be under pressure, cash flow, which you and others have talked about. It's going to be something that it's not going to be pretty this year. On the other hand, interest rates are lower. So you've got somewhat of a balancing out effect, but I really think the lower margins are going to put enough downward pressure where we're going to see things a little bit lower than what we saw the previous 12 months.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and share the results here, but so the majority of them said stay the same, but no one said increase. No one had an increase of 5% or more than 5%. Over half said a decrease, actually, if you take into account the less than 5 and the more than 5%. I just realized I didn't make, and Barry, I'd love your thoughts on this too. I just realized I kind of made a mistake in my question. I just said land prices. I didn't specify whether I was talking about land values or cash rents. Do you think that we could see a divergence in those two to where land prices maybe stay? You mentioned the interest rates, right? That's supportive. Low interest rates are supportive of land values. The stock market returns certainly aren't any good right now. So if you're looking for an investment, you might have some absentee land owners buying into land, right? That would be supportive of land values too. But then all the points you just made lead to depressed cash rents, right? So could we see a divergence of cash rent and land values because of all this?
We could. I mean, I don't think that we're going to see big swings, mainly because we're still going to have probably a number of producers in each county, in each region that are going to be well enough off that they're going to be able to continue to step in or bid higher cash rents. I still don't think we have a complete calamity yet to where we see cash rents really crash out. You know, one of the things that I think that we've proven over the last 3 or 4 years is that the U.S. is very supportive of agriculture in many ways, not just traditional government programs, but we've seen lots of ad hoc types of assistance. So as an investor, or just thinking of it in those terms, you've got to feel somewhat comforted by the fact that if you're going to invest in farmland, there's perhaps some kind of underlying safety net. But on the other hand, one of the things that I've counted as a safety net over the last 4 or 5, 10 years is the ethanol industry. The energy policy that we have in this country has been supportive too, but that seems to be melting away, at least temporarily.
It's certainly not positive looking,
No.
let's put it that way.
Okay, gentlemen and ladies, we'll go to a question. Ben, okay, I'll just say Ben. So if you have an insurance and plan to anyway for the next couple of years, do you go ahead and just sign up for WIP Plus?
Yeah, I would. Yeah,
Good.
I would call in, say, hey, I'm interested, fill out the form. The form, I originally was just going to take a snapshot and put it in the thing. It's one of the most simple FSA forms I've ever seen. It's just your name and your address, and then below it, they've just got columns listed for crop and how many acres. We don't have certainty. I was actually pestering the Ohio FSA office today. I was pestering Leonard. Poor Leonard. He hears more from me than I think he would like to. I'm pretty sure he's got a bullseye in his office and he just throws darts at me. But I was asking him, is this on an FSA base acre basis? Is this on a actual planted acre basis? What are we talking here? He didn't have an answer for him. I mean, they're not getting a lot of indication down from Kansas City, where FSA is headquartered there in Kansas City yet. So we're still kind of sorting out some of the details of this. I think there is a fixed amount to this pot. Now, it's not the same as our Paycheck Protection Program where it's first come, first serve. There's a fixed amount to this pot. So I think they're trying to figure out what's the enrollment going to be? And that's going to, maybe influence some of these values in terms of what payment factors they put around different crops. So, but as far as filling out the form, it's just listing your crops, your acreage, and then certifying your yield, which you can do that with crop insurance records. So yeah, I would tell everybody that has crop insurance and plans to buy crop insurance the next 2 years at the 60% value or above to call in and just talk to your FSA office, because you have nothing to lose if you're not eligible.
Okay, so we had just a statement. Would like to maybe have some discussion as a future topic, biofuel industry, where that's standing. And then Barry, this might be for, did you answer that one then about the?
Yeah, I just did. Yeah, it
Okay.
had to do with whether or not state unemployment tax was eligible or to be included under employee compensation for loan submission and forgiveness for PPP, and it is. So I'm assuming that was, I kind of also, well, I think that was the question. That's the way I took the question anyway.
Yes, Denise, if that's not, then chime back in. And then Ben, I think I heard you do your quick calculations on this next question about the best estimate for PLC payment for 2020 planted corn. And I think you said $25 an acre.
Well, that was 19.
That was 19. Oh, 2020.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
2019.
Well, we have a
Let's-
lot of way to go in 2020.
Well, we haven't even started the year yet.
Right,
The year doesn't
so-
start till September.
Get your crystal ball out.
Yeah. So right now I've dropped it 15 cents. We were estimating 3-4 months ago. I had a 351 corn price for 2020 for this year for the coming crop. I've dropped it 15 cents. So that takes us down to basically 336 for a season average marketing price. That's 370 is our reference price. So we're looking at a 34-cent decline times 176 bushels. You're looking at $60 an acre, $60 an acre. Now, granted, that's paid on 85% of your base acres. We're going to subtract off of government sequestration. Gotta get that government sequestration in there. We're still looking at $45 an acre for the 2020 crop. Now, we got a long way to go. But I understand the urgency behind knowing that number, right? We're potentially looking at putting a crop in the ground with a negative contribution margin of somewhere around $80-90 an acre, right? That's what we're looking at putting in the ground this year with a negative margin. So now we start figuring out, hey, can we, maybe prices get a little bit of an improvement. We can market our grain a little bit better, pick up $20-30 on improved grain marketing. We need maybe a little bit of support from another MFP type payment this year, that gets us another $40, right? That PLC payment is kind of our, that's what we're going to make our money off of. That's how we pay replacement costs for equipment. That's how we're going to pay ourselves in terms of our management. And this is how we pay labor.
If I have base acres, that's the.
Yeah, if you have if you don't have base acres, sorry, you're out.
And Matt asked a great question in the chat box, Ben, because it's right on my lips too. Are you keeping that decision calculator still updated on the Farm Bill website? So folks go to farmoffice.osu.edu and then hit the Farm Bill tab. You'll find the calculator that Matt's referring to that you can plug in your numbers for your farm specifically and kind of monitor that. How often do you update that, Ben?
Still trying to do it once a month. At this point, it's just cash flow basis, right? We're just basically using it to estimate potential cash flow payments because the enrollment periods the election period's already behind us. You can still, if you make changes to your operation right now to where you're picking up some ground, renting ground from somebody, or you change a structure of your farm to where maybe a brother is now farming it with you, or a sister is coming into the operation, or you're bringing a child into the operation as well. You can still change that enrollment decision with FSA, not the decision between ARC and PLC, but the enrollment of the farm through June 20th. So we're in the 2020 enrollment period, but the election's already behind us. So you no longer can elect Arkin PLC. We'll start that over again in September, October. But at this point, yeah, you can use that tool for cash flow planning.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Julie. We're at 9:30. You know, you start on time, you end on time, right? That's what, wait, sometimes in extension, we fail to live up to the start on time, end on time, but we're trying to do that. We would encourage you as you exit the meeting tonight, number one, thanks for being on and asking a lot of great questions. If there are questions that you get during the week, don't hesitate to email one of us. And we just look forward to having you back next Monday night here at Farm Office Live at 8 o'clock. And we'll address some of those comments that you put in the question box. Panelists, anything else before we end our meeting tonight? Besides, I'm ready for ice cream, Diane. That's where I'm going. Moose Tracks is on the docket.
You deliver to Columbus, David?
Not tonight, because there's
You
just
get your
enough Moose Tracks for me. I could get my Chick-fil-A at the same
You
time.
can get your Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
I would just thank everybody for being here. Really appreciate it. And just another plug, make sure you put comments or fill out that box of what you want us to tackle next week. That's kind of what we use to guide these discussions. And it looks like Mike wants to talk biofuel, so we might do something around that. But
great. All right, everyone, have a very safe week. Stay well.
Oops.
Hi, Mom. Oh, did she leave? Did we lose David?
It looks like it.
That's okay. That went pretty well, actually, I thought. What'd you all think?
It's amazing how fast an hour and a half goes.
I know. I had to warn, or I told Lyda. So Lyda and I met today about tomorrow, and originally she had 6 slides, and I was about to tell her, I was like, we only have a couple minutes, and that's when she said that you had told her it was like 4 minutes, and I was like, yeah, and I was
2 slides, 5 minutes.
What?
I told her 2 slides, 5 minutes.
Yep. And that's what I told her. And I was like, I said, it goes by really quick, really quick.
Well, I told her, I said, I smush into 1 slide what I would normally put on 3 or 4 and just build it together. And if we had control of advancing and so forth, then I would still do that, but it's never that solid. So I got to do something with my lighting. I'm sorry. This is just really weird tonight.
I think you look
like
fine.
I'm one of those dark.
The cows behind you.
Okay.
We
Well,
had a good crowd
meet.
too. We had 30. Not
Yeah.
bad for a really nice night.
Yeah, it is nice out too.
It's gorgeous outside.
So you want to just plan on meeting again after the Between the Rows on Friday, and at least that we know what's happening unless there's another 7 o'clock Friday release of a lot of information.
Gosh, I blame John Fulton for this. John told me, he's like, you're done for the week, because we had a meeting at the end of the day Friday, and he's like, you're done for the week, right? And I was like, oh, I said, it never works out that way. And he's like, the markets are closed, aren't they? And he said, what time the market's closed? I said 4:30. He said, well, then you're done for the day. And then that hit at 7 o'clock. It was like, no. Shucks. Blame you, John.
Oh, look, I'm taking Friday off. Huh. That's the plan. I am planning on taking some of next week off. we'll see
I'm
how that.
gonna get off of here. I still have to walk the dog yet tonight. So.
I'm going to go too, unless you
Yep.
guys need me for
I
anything.
think we're good.
Ben,
Thanks,
send me
everybody.
that link when you get it, and I'll put the replay up tomorrow.
Does it work? Does it work if I just forward you the email, or do I need to do anything with it?
I just need the link.
Okay. All
And
right.
Right, guys, thanks.
Bye, Diane.
So,
See you
all
later.
right, good night.
See ya.